welcome to the Witch's Cauldron. My name is Paula. Today I want to talk to you about something that a lot of people don't want to really acknowledge or embrace, and that is your shadow self. In other words, as you go through life, certain events happen that you carry with you. For instance, something that you're not necessarily proud of, whether it's, suppressed thought, some kind of like complex, like let's say you're afraid of a phobia, emotions that are linked to usually negative events in your life. And the concept of a shadow self it grew in part popularity with Carl Jung. So what he said was that for a person to be whole, you have to get to know and embrace the shadow side of yourself. When many times what we do, and I've been guilty of the same thing, is we tend to compartmentalize, put it in a box and put it on the shelf. And that's the way we deal with things. And that may not necessarily be the healthiest way to deal with what happens to you. And then once you go along denying that that event it does not make up part of you, and you keep repressing it, eventually all those boxes on all those shelves come tumbling down on top of you. So a lot of times you can realize what some of your shadow traits are, because you tend to kind of notice it in others. For instance, passive aggressive behavior. For instance, my mother was the big one that she never wanted to make a scene, so she always bit her tongue to keep peace. And it wasn't seemly, for a proper Southern lady to have a it wasn't seemly for a proper Southern lady of her generation to, be seen arguing, be loud, anything like that. And I found myself, especially with my ex-husband, really kind of biting my tongue just to keep the peace. And that was not a healthy thing for me to do. So a lot of times we put things down because we're ashamed of them. We put them up on that shelf because we're ashamed of them. We're afraid of them. And you want to deny that kind of event ever happened, or that those feelings that you're justified in feeling are valid. And you can really end up reacting in a very angry manner to someone who displays things about you that you may not necessarily like. So we develop a shadow self because we want to be more pleasing. You know, you want to do things to please your parents. You want to, you know, like I said, my mother was a big one for not raising scenes or making a scene. And here I was the youngest of their kids. I was born, there was a big gap in between me and my middle sister because my mother lost two children in between us. She almost lost me. And, you know, so by the time they got around to having me, or, you know, my mother was in her mid 30s, and that was just, that wasn't very seemly. You know, that was late to be having a child in the 60s, right? So we create our shadow self, you know, because my mother, here I was, you know, like 4 or 5 years old. My mother was in her early 40s, and she was worn out. She was just plain worn out and fed up, and she did not want this little rapscallion, you know, hooping and hollering all over the place. And I was always told to be quiet, to be quiet. You know, so then I learned in my teenage years, I went the opposite way. I was, you know, I would lash out in anger, and I would cuss a blue streak. Well, I still will, but that's, you know, just an innate part of me. But more importantly, is that started my behavior of biting my tongue and not really expressing what I needed from someone, not expressing to them how what they were doing was not meeting my needs. It was always me doing more to make up for their failure, so to speak. So we often find our shadow selves causing us to have, because of our own insecurities, things that we've experienced, it affects the way that we interact with those around us, especially those we love the most. Now, actually bringing up your shadow self and taking a very, very hard look at what events, what habits, what experiences you've had created that box for you to put it up on the shelf. So you have to learn that a shadow self is no different than the shadow that your body physically casts when you're walking outside. It's a part of you. It doesn't mean that you're going to get a free pass to be, you know, a bedhead, okay, or to behave in a negative manner. What deep shadow work on yourself does is help you grow and gain more self-awareness. It helps you learn to love yourself. It gives you self-acceptance, and it actually softens your attitudes toward other people. And it actually helps you to learn how to, once you learn how to love yourself, you can love someone else even deeper than you ever thought you could. So one of the things that a lot of witches do, Wiccans do, is to do what is called shadow work. And we typically do these shadow work on the dark moon. I have had several shadow masks in my years. And what a shadow mask is a physical representation of that box on the shelf. And everything, it may be multiple boxes that created that mask. Okay. I have one that I call failure, because at a very young age, I was always told that I was too much like my oldest sister, that I needed to be more like my middle sister. And that always just made me feel like I was less than, that I wasn't loved as much as my middle sister, which is, something that my childhood mind created. It was not anything that my mother ever said to me. It was not through, her actions or anything else, or my father for that matter. But, saying, well, why can't you be more like, your sister? She used to stay up till 2 a.m. writing papers. And my smart ass response was always, yeah, but I like to sleep. One of those things. So as I got older, I then took that failure to relationships, and that I was never good enough for whoever I was with. And it was always my fault that things fell apart. It was my fault that he cheated. And that was a recurring theme throughout my life and my first marriage. So there was that. And then the big one is, here I was, a trained emergency medical technician, and I had to work on my father, and my father passed away in my arms. And I had been able to save complete strangers. The first time I ever did CPR was on my best friend, because she got alcohol poisoning from some moonshine at a Bob Seger concert way back in the day, back in 1983, as a matter of fact. And we had been, and we still are, we're still best friends. And, we met in the 7th grade. We were 12, 13 years old when we met. And here we are in our 50s and, grandmas and everything else. And we're still best friends. So I was a failure at saving someone in my own family. So that was at the core of my post-traumatic stress disorder. And it really came down and hit me hard. And I still deal with that shadow mask. And the first time I ever did a shadow mask meditation, where I really and truly delved in at one of the most, that accounted for a lot of the boxes up on the shelf, had to deal with feeling that I was less than, or I didn't deserve the love, or that I was a failure in everything that I did. So when I did that meditation, and that mask was shown to me in the meditation, I recreated it with craft paint, with regular old acrylic paint, and a little mask that you get from, like Michael's or somewhere like that. Just a plain old, kid's mask kind of thing. And then I painted it, and I painted what was shown to me, and I decorated it in the manner that was shown to me. And then I bring that mask out when I do shadow work, and I still work on it. I have created other masks over the years. Some of them I have truly I'm going to say I overcame that mask and embraced that part of myself. I still got two that are hanging on, and that first one is one, and the other one has to do with repressed emotion, and I called it fire and ice, because I would ice my emotion down for so long that then it built up and built up and built up. And then all of a sudden, I would just, poof. And it was like I was off and popping, man. And well, I still find myself doing that occasionally, depending on who I'm dealing with. And for so many years, especially working in the environment that I did in public safety, you couldn't appear to be an emotional female. That would have ruined your career very quick, especially when I was hired. It is not like it is now. And we had to be, they made us look like guys. We had to act like guys. That's why I cuss like a, yeah, you know what? And I laugh sometimes. And I said, yeah, you can take the girl out of the firehouse, but you can't take the firehouse out of the girl. And it's the truth. And I will just bite my tongue because, I wanted to just lash out at someone, but I didn't want to be that emotional female. I kept hearing my mom say, don't make a scene. Don't make a scene. So it was like everything stuck right there in my craw until I lost my shit. So as the first time that you recognize and accept it, you've made a huge leap, because you see certain things that truly have formed you through childhood to your teens and then through your adulthood. And when you get to destroy one of those masks, and literally I have a ritual dedicated to destroying a shadow mask. If I ever get to destroy the last two, I keep trying, but they keep rearing up and bite me in the butt just when I think I have them whooped, It feels so good because I'm okay with being imperfect. I'm okay with being less than. If I, let somebody down, as long as I can look at myself in the mirror in the morning, I'm all right. And I embrace it now. Where for many, many years, I fought it tooth and nail. And once I learned how to embrace it and to do that really hard look at myself, to find the things that really kept me from fully realizing everything that I could be. And that was to my own standards, okay? once I realized that I didn't need to be perfect, that I didn't need to be everything to everyone, and that if somebody loved me, they would love me for, for all my flaws and everything else. And they wouldn't think twice about it. But I had to learn to love myself first and to quit beating myself up over and over and over again. My mother was one of the wisest people anywhere around. And the way that I process things is true to her words. And, the older that I get, the more that I sound like my mother and the more that I start looking like my mother. Except my mother never did rock, black, blue hair and have blue highlights in it. Hey, but she always said, no matter what happens to you, everything, good or bad, has a lesson and a blessing in it. You just have to open up your eyes and your heart to see it and feel it. And that was one of the things that, my dad dying the way that he did and me being there for him. Number one, my life lesson is that I was not God. I couldn't save everybody. Number two, my blessing was my father did not waste away from the stage 4 lung cancer that he had been diagnosed with. His pulmonary artery burst and he hemorrhaged to death very quickly, very painlessly. My other blessing that I had was the fact that I was there when my father passed away. It was then that I saw his spirit rise from his body the moment that I told him, it's okay, Pop. I'll take care of Mom. You can go on now. I was 28 years old when that happened. And that blessing caused me to embrace my psychic self, to work on being a medium, since I had been able to see spirit since I was a young child, and to really learn how to control the flow of information and not block off that part of myself. If it had not happened that way, I probably would not be here teaching Wicca and witchcraft, which I love to do, or being a paranormal investigator and teaching people about the paranormal and being a medium. I would not be what I am now without that event occurring. And with everything that has happened to me in my life, there literally has been a lesson and a blessing in everything. So if you can stop and have the chutzpah to take a really hard look at yourself, look for the lesson and look for the blessing, because they're right there in front of you. And once you embrace them, you can take those damn boxes off the shelf once and for all. So that's it, my friends. I will do a shadow mask meditation. And I encourage you to do some shadow work and to look at yourself And this isn't just for witches. This is for everyone. This shadow self is not, strictly for witches or Wiccans or pagans. This is everyone. And the old thing, God put you to it, he'll get you through it. And I think that everyone can learn from doing shadow work, not just witches. So with that, my friends, this one was a little somber, wasn't it? As I always say, merry we did meet, merry we will part, until we merry meet again. And until then, everyone, be well and walk in love and light. Bye.